I remember the night clearly, though I wish I could forget it. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes each breath feel heavy. A pale mist curled around the trees, shifting with a faint breeze, and the only sound was the soft crunch of leaves beneath my boots. My flashlight flickered once, twice, and I caught a movement in the corner of my eye. A shadow that didn't belong, a silhouette too tall, too thin, almost gliding. I should turn back. I know that now. But something kept pulling me deeper, past the line where the forest seemed normal. Every step sank into a wet, earthy floor, and the smell of moss and decay hung thick in the air. Then the humming started, a low, vibrating sound that seemed to echo from nowhere and everywhere at once. I froze. The hairs on my arms stood up, and in the pale light, I thought I saw eyes reflecting back at me from the darkness. That's when I saw it. The fog lay thick across the forest floor. It moved like water, curling around the roots, drifting through the branches. The air was damp, heavy with the smell of moss and wet earth. I could hear it first, barely. A hum, low and constant, rising and falling with the wind. It wasn't a melody, exactly, more like a vibration that settled in my chest. The pines leaned in, or maybe I was leaning too close. Every needle seemed to shiver. Shadows pulled at the bases of the trees, stretching longer than they should. I followed the hum without thinking. Soft footsteps on soaked leaves, each one swallowed almost immediately by the fog. My fingers brushed against bark, cold, rough, alive in a way that shouldn't be possible. The deeper I went, the more the forest seemed to lean toward me. Branches twined like fingers, brushing my shoulders. Every exhale I took left a mist that felt like it lingered just to watch me. Then I saw the words, carved or grown into the bark of an old pine, letters pale and curling, spelling out a name I knew but didn't remember. I blinked. The hum dipped. Almost a sigh. I touched the tree. Rough and wet, the letters pulsed beneath my fingers. Soft vibrations, almost like a heartbeat, or maybe mine echoing against the trunk. A shadow moved behind me, or I imagined it. It was tall, thin, lingering where the fog grew heavier. When I turned, nothing was there. Just the hum, just the whispers. I pressed on. The trees seemed to murmur in a language I almost understood. Words like breath against my neck, like someone standing close but silent. I bent to look at the next tree. Another message, this one more urgent, sharp in the grooves of bark. I tried to speak, but my voice stayed lodged in my throat. The hum swelled with a pause, filling the space between the trunks. It pressed at my ears, soft but relentless. Something brushed my hand again. No, it was the wind. Surely. The fog thinned slightly, pale light spilling through the branches. I could see the forest floor more clearly now. Twigs snapped beneath invisible feet. The hum flickered, dipping low, teasing me with its absence. I didn't want to stop, but the air had grown colder, a chill that wrapped around my spine and settled in my bones. I reached for another tree. Another word, another message meant only for me. I could almost feel them breathing. And then silence. The hum vanished as suddenly as it came. The fog pressed close, muffling all other sound. I stood alone, the words still carved in bark, but no echo to guide me further. The shadows waited, tall and still, stretching toward me. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. Only the fog and the forest remained, and the memory of a voice, too soft to catch, whispering secrets I wasn't ready to know. The mist clung to the ground like a slow, breathing thing. Each step I took pressed it deeper into my shoes, wet and cold. The path ahead was a blur, pale light folding into gray. I could feel it before I saw it. Saw footsteps pacing just behind mine, not close enough to touch, but close enough to make the skin along my neck prickle. I stopped. The footsteps didn't. They matched me exactly. Every shift, every shuffle. I held my breath. The mist trembled. Shapes moved at the edge of my vision. A tree twisted. A shadow stretched along the path. Then, gone. The rhythm behind me faltered. A pause. Just one heartbeat long. And the air thickened, heavy with something that smelled faintly of wet earth and something sharper, like metal. I wanted to run. but the mist pressing around my ankles, slowing me, whispering I shouldn't. Every instinct told me I was alone, but the footsteps said otherwise. I tried to peer through the gray. Figures hovered and dissolved, just at the edge of clarity. Leaves rustled, though no wind moved them. I could hear it, soft, deliberate circling. A flash of movement caught my eye. A pale light shimmered, not from the sky, but from the mist itself. I blinked. The path seemed to bend, bending me with it, twisting. I exhaled slowly, feeling the damp cling to my skin. The footsteps resumed, deliberate, closer, then further, then stopped. Silence that felt like pressure pressing into my chest. I tried to tell myself it was imagination, but the hum was there, low, almost musical. Something alive, weaving between the fog and the soil. I took another step. The mist parted slightly, revealing nothing, yet something moved against the corner of my eye. A figure or a trick of shadow. My heart thudded like it might escape my chest. The air was cold, cold enough to taste. I reached out, fingertips brushing against the mist, and it recoiled like smoke. Then quiet footsteps, closer this time, stopping just behind me, so close I could feel the heat it borrowed from the air. I didn't turn. I couldn't. The path ahead seemed endless, the mist thickening into walls. Softly, I heard a whisper in the hush. Or maybe it was the fog itself sighing. A name I didn't know, or one I had forgotten. I kept walking. The steps followed, always just behind, just out of sight. Every now and then, I thought I glimpsed eyes, pale and still, watching from the mist. Finally, the path opened into a hollow. The footsteps stopped. A stillness, so complete it ached in my ears that I waited. Nothing moved. The mist curled around me, gentle now, almost protective. Almost that I turned slowly, but there was no one. Just fog, just silence, and the faint, lingering trace of footsteps fading into the earth. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of moss and wet earth. Fog clung to the ground, curling around the roots and fallen leaves. It was almost silent, except for the distant rustle of branches. I noticed it then, a pale light dancing just beyond the trees. Too high to be a lantern, too flickering to be natural. It hovered there, teasing, fragile, as if it could vanish at any moment, and why feet moved before I thought to stop. Each step pressed into soft soil, leaving shallow prints that disappeared almost immediately. The fog shifted around me, brushing my ankles, cold and wet. The light pulsed, a heartbeat in the shadows. I ducked under a low branch, its rough bark scratching my shoulder. The air smelled faintly of ash, or maybe decay. I couldn't tell. I followed it deeper into the forest. Shadows stretched long, bending toward me, reluctant yet insistent. Something moved in the corner of my vision, like curtains swaying without wind. The clearing opened suddenly, wider than I expected. Moonlight barely reached it, and yet the pale light danced across the ground between the trees. These shadows there seemed alive, moving in slow waves, like they were breathing. I stood at the edge, mesmerized. The flickering light traced patterns in the fog, fragile and impossible. A faint laughter, or maybe just the wind, brushed my ears. It curled inside me, a thrill and a warning at once. I stepped forward. The soft earth sank beneath my boots. A twig snapped, echoing too loudly in the emptiness. The light shivered, darting upward, vanishing among the branches. The clearing was silent then. No flicker, no shadow, just a pale wash of moonlight, and the fog curling like smoke. I wanted to leave. My lungs burned with anticipation. My skin prickled with unease. But I stayed rooted, between wanting to run and needing to see. I could feel the forest breathing. Leaves whispered against each other, carrying echoes of the light's departure. Every rustle made me think it had returned. Then nothing. A hollow stillness pressed against my ears. I crouched near a tree, its bark rough and cold under my palms. The fog rolled around my knees, thick and chilling. For a moment, I thought I saw shapes, thin, pale figures flickering at the edge of my vision. They melted when I blinked, leaving only the quiet, the echo, the lingering scent of damp earth. Time slowed. Breath came in shallow pulls. I wanted to move, to follow, but the forest had shifted. Paths that had been clear moments ago were tangled, unfamiliar. The laughter or wind rose again, soft and teasing. It brushed against my cheek, almost intimate, almost cruel. I shivered, not from cold, but from the impossible anticipation lingering inside me. It was close, and yet unreachable. I turned slowly, every sense straining. The clearing was empty, the pale light gone. But the forest felt alive, waiting, aware. I left that place quietly, boots sinking into mud. The fog swallowed the clearing behind me. And still in the distance, I thought I heard it faint, flickering, and impossible. The fog lay heavy between the trees. Each breath I took felt damp, clinging to my skin. The underbrush whispered, soft but constant, brushing against itself. I stopped. Nothing moved. Not a bird. Not a fox. Just a low hum, like static under my feet, vibrating through the soles of my shoes. A shadow flickered beyond the thicket. I thought it was a trick of the mist. But then the rustling returned, closer this time, sliding along the edges of sight. My heartbeat thudded against my ribs. I want to call out. My mouth opened, but only a shallow breath escaped. It felt wrong, too wrong. The hum grew louder, sharper. It scraped against my eardrums and pressed against my chest. I stepped back, boots sinking slightly in the damp earth. The leaves shivered with me, trembling as though they, too, were afraid. Something shifted again, just beyond reach, a movement that didn't belong. Not a creature I had ever seen. It was deliberate, watching. I spun slowly, trying to trace it. Fog wrapped around my arms, cold and sticky. The air smelled faintly of wet soil and rot, of things hiding and waiting. I swallowed, taste bitter and metallic. The rustling didn't stop. It circled, skimming closer with each pulse of static. I was alone, but every nerve told me I wasn't. My hands shook. The pale light from the thinning sky barely reached the forest floor. It painted jagged shadows that flickered and breathed. I imagined figures folding between the trees, watching, waiting. I crouched instinctively, pressed my back against a tree trunk. Its bark was rough, spongy with moss. The vibration of static traveled up through the ground, into my legs, making me shiver. I dared not look directly at the underbrush. A sudden snap of a twig. I jerked, heart hammering, lungs tight. Silence swallowed it immediately. Then the rustle returned, softer, deliberate, like careful footsteps brushing the earth. I tried to trace the sound with my eyes, but the fog warped everything. Each shadow flickered in ways the wind could not account for. A sickening thought crept in. I wasn't walking into the forest. The forest was moving around me. I backed slowly, each footstep cautious, almost praying the ground would stay still beneath me. The hum hummed, high and piercing now, vibrating through the air as if the forest itself was alive. I could feel it in my teeth, my jaw, my temples. Then a pause. The underbrush stilled. The fog softened, curling around my ankles like a slow, cold tide. I froze, barely breathing. Something shifted once more, too fast, too silent. My mind flinched, imagining dozens of eyes tracing me. Every rustle predator I couldn't name. I realized then that the forest had no paths, only places I was allowed to step, and even those were never safe. I stayed pressed to the tree, waiting for the shift that never came. The hum faded slightly, the rustling dulled, but I knew it hadn't gone. It lingered. The fog thickened. I felt it wrap around my shoulders, settle like a blanket I hadn't asked for. Alone but watched, heart still racing, breath shallow. The underbrush was quiet now. I couldn't see it. I couldn't hear it. Yet I felt every movement, every small shift, every presence I couldn't name. I took one slow step back, then another, and another, never stopping, never looking back. The forest held its breath with me, and I knew, even if I left, it would remember me. The fog had already swallowed the path before I even reached it. It curled around the trees, thick and damp, clinging to my jacket. Every step pressed into silence, yet the earth hummed beneath my boots. I thought I knew this forest. I thought I knew the edges of the clearing, the way the ground dipped toward the creek. But now, shapes melted into gray mist, twisting and reshaping with every blink. A rustling, small, distant, or maybe right beside me. I held my breath. The fog smelled cold, wet like iron leaves, and it made my skin prickle. Then they appeared, not all at once. At first just a glint, a pale reflection caught in the corner of my eye. But the longer I stared, the more dots of light emerged, hovering in the haze. Eyes, dozens of them. They didn't blink, or maybe I blinked too slowly. Each one held a faint silver glow, pale as moonlight, and they seemed curious, watching. I tried to tell myself it was a trick of the fog, but when I looked away, when I blinked and refocused, they had shifted, closer, yet never too close. I wanted to run. The cold fog clung tighter, as if it knew, as if it could hold me in place. My own breath sounded loud. Every inhale, every exhale, filling the space between me and those eyes. I could feel their weight, pressing softly against my chest, even from a distance. A snap, leaves underfoot, or perhaps something smaller, something moving between the trees. The eyes blinked once, just once, and then froze again, locked in their pale stare. I should have turned back. I should have run to the path, to warmth, to light. But the fog, it drew me forward. And those eyes, they seemed to pulse, not with threat, but with need. I whispered my own name, softly, like a spell. It echoed back, hollow, through the damp air. And for a moment, I felt noticed, small, exposed, fragile, yet held somehow in the gaze of something too many to count. The clearing opened. Moonlight broke through the fog in thin, shivering beams, and the eyes followed, retreating just enough to let me step forward. I thought I had seen their last flicker, but then in the softest part of the fog, I caught it, a reflection that wasn't mine, pale light in the mist, a shadow moving, subtle, impossible to track. I could feel a breath, cold, brushing the back of my neck. Though no one was there, I stopped. The forest was silent again. Only the fog shifted, curling around roots and branches like smoke. I listened, I waited, and then I moved. Slowly, step by step, the eyes faded into gray. The fog thinned, the path returned. But the memory lingered, those countless silver lights, unblinking, watching, waiting. Even now, in the quiet of my room, I can see them. Blink and they vanish. Blink again and they're back. Always just at the edge of vision. Always in the fog. The forest was quiet that evening. Mist curled around the trunks, thick and soft, muffling my steps. A pale light slipped through the branches, broken by shadows that lingered too long. I wandered farther than usual. The scent of damp leaves and cold earth clung to my clothes. And then I saw it. A tree, wider than any I had ever seen. Its bark split and hollowed, forming a doorway just tall enough to step inside. I hesitated, feeling the chill from its hollow mouth. Something whispered in my chest, coaxing me forward. The air inside was different. Old, heavy. It smelled like dust and forgotten secrets, like the pages of a book no one had read in centuries. I ran my hand along the wall. Faint carvings pressed into the wood, spirals and lines I did not recognize. Symbols that made the skin on my neck prickle. A hum began, soft at first, almost drowned by the wind outside, then steady, rhythmic, like the tree was breathing or watching. I held my breath. The wood beneath my fingers vibrated, gentle, insistent. I stepped back, thinking I had imagined it, but the hum deepened, echoing in my chest. I wanted to leave. My feet moved slowly, dragging over roots that seemed to twist beneath the floor. The carvings almost shimmered in the dim light, shifting when I looked away. Outside, the forest felt thinner, the mist less forgiving. Yet the sound followed, curling around the trees, pressing against my ears. I ran, or at least tried. Branches tore at my sleeves, leaving scratches that stung with cold. The hum stayed with me, quiet now but persistent. I stopped by a stream, its water black under the fading light. Breath on my face, mist in my hair, my fingers numb from cold and fear. I realized I could still hear it. Soft, low, like the echo of a word I couldn't remember. I turned back once, just for a glimpse. The tree stood empty, silent under the pale fog. Yet I knew it was not silent. It never would be. Even now, I think I can hear it. A hollow rhythm, deep and patient, waiting. And I wonder, does it want to come back? Or is it already inside me, humming beneath my ribs, tracing those strange, untranslatable symbols along the walls of my mind? I walk on. The fog swallows my steps. The forest stretches, endless and quiet. But sometimes when the wind shifts just right, I hear it again. Soft footsteps, a shadow breathing beside me. The hollow tree, always behind my eyes. The night was quiet, colder than I expected. A thin fog hovered over the stream, curling around the reeds like smoke. Moonlight spilled over the water, silver and pale, revealing shapes I didn't want to see. I knelt at the edge, boots sinking slightly into wet soil. The stream moved gently, almost lazily, but the surface shimmered oddly. Something glinted below, a shape that didn't belong. At first, I thought it was a trick of the moon, the reflection of my own face, maybe rippling with the current, but it twisted slowly in ways I couldn't make sense of. A curve where a shoulder shouldn't bend, a hand that reached down then vanished. I swallowed hard. The air smelled damp, mossy, with a faint metallic tang. The stream licked the bank, small waves reaching for me, hesitant but insistent. I stepped back. The ground felt uneven, roots pressing against my soles. My heart thumped, loud in the silent forest. Every breath I drew seemed stolen by the night itself. I stared again. The water pulsed just slightly, as though it knew I was watching. The reflection turned slowly to meet my eyes, or at least it tried. It wasn't my eyes staring back. A cold shiver ran up my spine. I imagined it stepping from the water, pale and wet, reaching with long, thin fingers. I wanted to look away, but my body refused. I felt trapped in that small circle of moonlight. The wind shifted, brushing the reeds against my skin. Rustling whispers threaded through the night, soft enough I couldn't place words. Or maybe they weren't words at all. Something in the rhythm of the stream hummed with the same pulse as my heart. I stumbled, tripping over a root, and fell forward. The water lapped at my boots. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined the reflection's motion. Then it rose slightly, bending unnaturally, tilting toward me. My breath caught. I wanted to scream. The forest held me in a silence so deep it pressed against my ears. I blinked and it was gone. Just a stream, still and quiet. The moon reflected normally now, my own face staring back without distortion. But the feeling lingered. The wet rustle of reeds seemed to follow me as I stepped away. Shadows pooled around the trees, darker than the night itself. I want to convince myself it had been nothing, a trick of light, imagination, fatigue. Yet every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again, twisting beneath the water, waiting. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Soft footsteps behind me, mine, or someone else, echoed on the moist earth. By the time I reached the path leading home, the stream had become just a ribbon of moonlight. Still, the memory clung, a faint ripple in my chest. I could feel its gaze beneath the skin, cold and patient, waiting for the next night. The air was damp, thick with the scent of pine and wet earth. Fog lingered low over the clearing, curling around the gnarled roots. I had been walking for hours, or maybe minutes. Time blurred. A cabin emerged. Its wood was gray, bleached by sun and storm. The windows stared back like pale eyes, empty and unwelcoming. I stepped closer. Branches scraped against my coat. A hush fell, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. The door groaned as I pushed it open. Inside, the smell of dust and mildew pressed against my lungs. Static hummed faintly from somewhere in the shadows, low and constant. Papers littered the floor. Some were torn, others curled at the edges. Marks scrawled across them. Shapes I couldn't name, twisting like roots beneath a pale moon. I knelt, fingertips brushing the rough edges. They crinkled under my touch, whispering across the floor. The radio hummed again. I didn't see it at first, just that persistent, quiet static. It filled the room like a pulse. I thought I heard words buried within it, soft and fleeting, impossible to catch. A door creaked behind me. Slow, deliberate. I froze. The shadows didn't shift. No one was there. Yet the creak echoed like a breath held too long. I walked toward it, each step pressed into the floorboards with a muted thud. The hum of the radio felt heavier now, pressing against my temples. My own heartbeat seemed loud. The markings on the papers caught my eye again. They were almost moving, or maybe my eyes were failing me. Lines bent, crossed, and tangled like something breathing beneath the paper. Another creak, closer this time. I turned, slowly, expecting someone. Nothing, just a fog seeping into the broken window, curling in lazy spirals across the floor. I tried the door. It resisted, then swung open with a reluctant moan. Outside, the fog wrapped around me, chilling my skin. The forest was still and watching. I stumbled back toward the clearing. The static lingered in my ears, faint but unyielding. The cabin silhouette seemed to follow me, hunched and waiting. Branches snapped underfoot. Cold sweat dripped down my neck. The papers of my mind burned. The strange markings etched behind my eyes. I dared to glance back. The cabin looked smaller now, shrunken in the fog, but the sense of being watched remained. A whisper at the edge of thought. I ran. Leaves slapped against my ankles. Fog pressed against my chest. The hum lingered, soft yet unrelenting, and I imagined it everywhere, in the air, in the trees, in the quiet of my own breath. Finally, I slowed. The clearing was empty. The cabin was gone. Or maybe it had never been there at all. Only the fog remained, and the hum, faintly in my ears. The air was cold, damp, and heavy with the scent of wet stone. A pale morning light seeped through the cracks in the trees, casting long shadows over the moss-covered rocks. I found myself drawn to a hollow there, tucked between two jagged boulders. It hummed, a soft, melodic sound that seemed to breathe with the wind. At first, it felt warm, inviting, like it wanted me to lean closer. I stepped forward. The moss squished beneath my boots, wet and soft, and the chill kissed my skin. The hum seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. Then I heard it, a whisper, my name, faint, distorted, slipping in and out of the melody. I froze. The air tasted metallic, sharp, like iron lingering on my tongue. I wanted to leave. My body told me to run. But something deeper, something quiet and curious, kept me rooted. The hollow seemed smaller now, tighter, as if the rocks had shifted while I wasn't looking. The hum thickened, vibrating in the hollow, brushing against my ears, crawling under my skin. I could feel it in my chest, in the tips of my fingers, humming through the soles of my boots. Another whisper, my name, stretched thin, elongated, tangled in the hum. It sounded wrong. Not like me, not like anyone I knew, but it beckoned. I knelt, placing my hand on the damp stone. The hum warmed beneath my palm, a subtle vibration that felt alive. The moss tickled my skin, soft yet prickling, and I inhaled the cold, mineral-heavy scent of the hollow. The sun shifted, casting a pale line of light across the hollow's mouth. It danced on the curves of the rocks. Something moved in that light, or maybe it was a shadow, teasing the edges of my vision. I leaned closer. The whisper pressed against me now, sharper, clearer, though still warped. It was everywhere and nowhere. The hollow breathed around me. A shiver ran down my spine. The hum dropped a note, low and thrumming, almost like a warning. I swallowed hard, tasting the dampness in my mouth. The whisper followed, curling around my thoughts, winding through the hollows of my mind. I wanted to speak, but the words stuck in my throat. I only listened. The hollow listened too. The air quivered. The hum softened, folding into the stones themselves. It became a presence, waiting, watching. I felt it in the hairs on my arms, in the backs of my knees, in the way the fog brushed past my cheeks. I stepped back reluctantly. The hum lingered, gentle now, almost mournful. The whisper, my name, faint and fading, slipped between the cracks in the rocks and into the rustling leaves. A bird called somewhere far above, sharp and sudden, breaking the spell. I inhaled the earthy scent of moss and rain. The hollow exhaled, settling into silence, leaving only the memory of warmth that had never truly been safe. I turned away, footsteps soft on wet stone, heart still humming in rhythm with the hollow. Behind me, the hollow waited, quiet, patient, alive in ways I would never understand. The air was still. A brittle winter night had settled over the forest, and the path beneath my boots glinted with frost. Pale starlight danced across the ice, cold fingers brushing my face as I walked. Each step cracked softly, echoing against the frozen trees. I hadn't expected the path to turn like this. One moment it was bare dirt and fallen leaves. The next it was glassy, slippery, reflecting shapes that didn't belong to me. I paused, toes crunching on the frost, and noticed them. Footprints, beside mine. Small, deliberate, too neat to be accidental. They led forward, glinting in the starlight, edges soft, almost breathing in the cold. I swallowed, the air sharp in my lungs, and followed. The frost under my boots hummed with each step, a quiet rhythm that matched the quick beat of my chest. I wanted to call out, to ask who had come this way, but the night swallowed my voice before it could form. Branches whispered overhead. A crow's wing brushed the dark, somewhere beyond the clearing. I moved on, each footstep closer to the strange trail, feeling eyes pressing against my back. The wind shifted, brushing along the path like a hand that didn't belong to anyone. I could smell the frozen earth, sharp and wet, a scent that felt alive, waiting. The footprints didn't falter. They didn't pause. They led me deeper, twisting the path into a stretch of black shadows and frost. I wanted to turn back, but curiosity wrapped around my spine, cold and insistent. Every step I took, I heard it. The quiet brush of boots on ice, though I knew I was alone. The stars above flickered, pale light trembling on the frozen surface. I followed. The woods thinned, leaving a thin veil of fog curling over the ground. I thought I might see someone ahead, a figure perhaps, but the fog only breathed, curling around bare roots and stones. The footprints stopped at the edge of a field, an open expanse, pale under the stars, silvered frost covering everything like a frozen sea, and empty. Nothing moved. No trees swayed. No shadows lingered. I bent to touch the ice where the prints ended. Nothing, not even a dent. It was as though the footprints had been carved into the air and the cold swallowed them whole. A shiver passed along my arms, the cold deeper now, not just in the frost beneath my boots. I turned slowly. The path behind me had vanished into black woods. No trace of footprints, mine or anyone else's. The fog thickened, curling at my knees, brushing my ankles, carrying whispers I couldn't place. I felt the weight of being watched, every nerve thrumming, but saw nothing, only the hum of the ice beneath my steps. Though I had stopped moving, I drew my coat tighter. My breath puffed out in clouds, small ghosts in the pale light. I tried to step forward again. The field stretched endlessly, glittering and empty, and the prints, they were gone. A rustling flickered at the edge of my sight, shadows bending, but when I looked, only frost and fog remained. The night was so quiet it pressed against my ears. I wanted to run. I didn't. Something in me waited, hovering between fear and fascination. A soft crack echoed somewhere, distant, yet precise. My heart thumped against my ribs, slow, heavy, but I forced myself to breathe. The field was wide, open, and still. Nothing moved. I knelt, brushing frost with my fingertips, feeling the brittle chill bite gently. And then silence. I could hear my own pulse, steady, alone. No footprints. No one. Just a frozen path, the empty field, and the stars trembling high above. I stepped forward, careful, soft. The frost whispered under my boots, welcoming me into the emptiness. And I realized the trail had never existed, except to lead me here, alone. The wind curled around me, brushing my ears, a soft, cold exhale. I could feel the eyes, still, not leaving, though nothing was there. I turned slowly, again and again, tracing the path that wasn't there. The night held me in its quiet, vast and endless, and I walked, guided by nothing, watched by everything under the pale, trembling stars. The fog had returned. It clung to the ground like smoke from a fire long gone. Each step I took felt softer, swallowed by a damp silence. I thought I heard voices first. Low murmurs, distant, almost beneath hearing. They weren't words, just fragments, like someone speaking underwater. I stopped. The fog shifted around me. Cold droplets brushed my cheeks. A shape flickered, white, tall, impossible, and vanished when I blinked. I tried to follow it. The ground was uneven. Roots clawed at my shoes. Leaves rustled, though no wind moved. Every time I turned, the shapes were gone. Empty space, fog, and that quiet hum. It pressed against my ears, soft, insistent. A voice, or something pretending to be a voice, brushed my name. Not my name, not quite. Something close, but wrong. I twisted in place, searching for its source. The mist thickened. It wrapped around me, wet and cold, and I could barely see my own hands. I remember the smell. Rotten leaves and something metallic, faint, like old blood. I inhaled too sharply, gagged on the damp air. Shapes moved again. Not people. Not shadows. Something else entirely. Tall, lean, bending at angles that shouldn't exist. I tried to call out, my voice swallowed by fog, broken into echoes that made me pause. Each echo sounded like a dozen whispers, circling. I wanted to run, but my feet were heavy, stuck in soft earth that seemed to pull me down. The fog shifted again. A pale light glimmered somewhere in the distance, dim and hesitant. I thought I saw a path. I thought I saw safety. When I stepped closer, the light moved farther, slow, deliberate. I stumbled into a shallow hollow. Cold water lapped at my ankles. A rustle behind me, soft, dragging like wet cloth across stone. I froze. The fog pulsed. I could feel breath against my neck. Not mine, not warm. Shapes returned, flickering, twisting, laughing in silence. They moved in patterns I couldn't track. Every time I tried to focus, they blurred. I caught a glimpse of pale faces. Eyes black voids. Then nothing. I whispered to myself, but it sounded wrong. My words returned, twisted like the fog had memorized me. I tried to turn, to leave, but I couldn't tell which way was forward. The ground was a mirror of sky and mist. Steps echoed beneath my own, soft and wrong, as if someone walked just behind me. The voices gathered, low and urgent, murmuring together, then splitting, then vanishing. I wanted to follow them, wanted to find clarity, but I had no direction. The fog pressed closer, and shapes danced at the edge of my sight. I blinked. One remained, watching, waiting. The air felt thicker, heavier. My skin prickled. I felt cold in places that hadn't touched the air yet. I couldn't tell if I was breathing or if the fog was breathing for me. Then silence. Not a pause, not a soft lull, just absence. I couldn't hear anything, couldn't see anything. The fog had swallowed me whole. I stumbled forward, hands outstretched, trying to feel the world. Nothing, just wet, clammy nothing. And then a soft hum, not threatening, not loud, just there, beneath the fog, inside my chest. The shapes weren't there, the voices weren't there, but I knew they had never left. I kept moving, step by step, into the fog, into the murmuring that would not end. The air was damp tonight, thick with the scent of wet leaves and soil. A pale light hung low behind the tree line, too soft to cast real shadows, yet the trees themselves seemed restless. I walked slowly, my boots pressing into mud, each step sinking a little too far. Shadows flickered along the edge of the forest. At first, I thought it was a wind brushing branches, but they moved with a strange deliberation, twisting and bending in ways that no light should allow. I froze. One shadow leaned closer. I stepped back. It recoiled, as if it had anticipated me, then shifted sideways, keeping pace, but never directly behind. The silence pressed in, heavier than the damp night air, so complete it swallowed the rustle of leaves, even a small, stubborn drip of water from a broken branch. I blinked, and in that fraction of a moment, the shadow duplicated me. Or was it me that duplicated the shadow? My reflection in darkness moved with my hesitation, then twisted, stretched, becoming something else. I could hear my own breath, uneven and tight, but it sounded different here, like it was mirrored, slightly behind, echoing back from nowhere. Every footstep I took was met with its twin, but always just out of sync, always just wrong. I tried to convince myself it was imagination, the mind playing tricks in the pale light. Yet my skin prickled with something colder than the night. I could feel it in my bones. Something was following. Not a body, not a shape I could see, but a presence patient. I stopped entirely. Nothing moved, at least nothing visible. The air tasted faintly metallic, like blood in the mouth of the forest. The shadows clung to the edges of my vision, never stepping into the weak light, but always shifting when I dared to look directly. A branch snapped. I didn't move. It sounded too deliberate, too close, or maybe it was inside my head. The fog thickened around the tree lean, curling at my ankles, and I could feel it breathing with me. It pressed against my skin, wet, cold, silent, and the shadows began to stretch longer, thinner, till they nearly scraped the ground. I turned slowly. Every shadow turned with me, but never exactly the same way. One elongated like liquid black, another flickered like candlelight over stone, another froze entirely, hanging in the air for a heartbeat too long. I tried to whisper, a single word, anything to break the tension, but my voice trembled, swallowed by the stillness. No echo returned, only the rustle of unseen things in the underbrush and the soft brush of fog against my face. I felt a tug at the edge of perception, like fingertips grazing the back of my mind. Not pain, not fear exactly, more like being watched while forgetting the feeling of safety. I wanted to run, but my legs were heavy, uncooperative. A shadow darted forward, then dissolved, leaving a smear of darkness across the ground. I caught a glimpse of it again, just at the corner of my eye, a mirror of myself, but wrong. Limbs too long, posture too sharp, a presence that should not exist in the quiet woods. The tree lean seemed to lean closer, the trees bending just slightly as though listening. Even the wind stopped, leaving the fog thick and suffocating. I swallowed hard. The air was still, but the pressure of the shadows lingered, watching, waiting. I didn't move for a long time. I let the darkness stretch over me, let the fog curl around my ankles and whisper against my skin. Eventually, I took a careful step back. The shadows followed, then paused, then dispersed slightly, like smoke retreating from a flame. I walked on slowly, feet sinking in mud, fog clinging, silence pressing, and I felt the shadows still behind me, a memory of movement stretching endlessly into the night. The creek winds like a pale ribbon through the hollow. Water moves over stones, smooth and silent, yet something lingers beneath its surface. A chill rides a wind, brushing my neck, leaving goosebumps. I step closer. The water ripples, and I see faces. Not my own, not anyone I know. Eyes that blink too slowly, mouths that move without sound. They follow me. The wind hisses through the hollow trees. I think it's speaking, warnings or pleas, but I can't understand. The leaves rustle like whispers just beyond hearing. I want to turn, but my feet stay rooted. The sky dims. Pale light dances across the water. Shadows curl over banks. A soft hum rises from the creek. Not music, not wind. Something deeper. Something waiting. I touch the water. Cold bites at my fingers. Ripples spread across the surface, and the faces shift, leaning closer, silent and still. I blink. They vanish, but the hum stays. A branch snaps. I spin, expecting someone, anything, but the hollow holds only echoes. My breath comes fast. The creek gurgles, mocking me. I imagine hands beneath the surface, just brushing my toes. I can't tell if I hear or feel it. A sudden reflection glints, a face pressed against the water from below. It stares, unblinking. I step back. The ground feels soft and wet, sucking at my boots. The wind catches my hair and whispers again, pulling me toward the center. I think I hear footsteps behind me, soft, hesitant, matching my pace, but never touching the leaves. I stop. They stop. The faces return in the current, this time closer. Grief and longing frozen in watery eyes. Something in me recognizes them, and fear twists with a hollow ache. I want to leave. I can't. The hum grows, vibrating in my chest. I kneel by the creek, hands hovering above the water. It shivers beneath my palms, alive, aware. The wind pushes harder, cold and wet. I taste the hollow air, metallic and sharp. I hear it then, a single whisper, not through my ears, but inside my mind. Stay. My chest tightens. The water gleams under a fractured moon. The hollow wraps around me, tight and silent. The wind dies suddenly. Even the hum retreats. Everything waits. I want to run. My feet won't obey. I am small in the shadow of the creek, and yet it watches me like a patient predator. I feel it in my bones. This place does not want to let me go. I close my eyes. The water laps gently at the edges of the bank. Faces shimmer, pale and unreadable. I hear nothing now, save my own breath, ragged and shallow. The hollowed creek does not move, yet somehow I do not leave, and perhaps I never will. The fog was thick that evening, curling low among the trees. My boots sank slightly into the damp earth with each step. Branches whispered above me, their shadows long and pale under the fading light. I thought I was alone. A snapping twig sounded behind me. I paused. No one came into view. The air smelled of wet pine and something older, sour, buried beneath the moss. I whispered a name I hadn't spoken in years. The forest answered before my voice had fully formed. A pause too long, then a shifting among the trunks, soft, deliberate, patient. Every rustle felt measured, as if the trees themselves were leaning closer to listen. Leaves brushed my cheek like fingers, wet and cold. My breath came shallow. I wanted to speak again, to tell it to leave, but the words dissolved in the damp air. The ground trembled faintly beneath me, or maybe it was only the tension crawling along my spine. I stepped forward. Soft footsteps followed, matching mine exactly. The rhythm, perfect, patient, eternal. The fog thickened suddenly, clinging to my skin, filling my lungs with its damp weight. I could hear it then, the faintest hum, low and unbroken, threading through the stillness. It was not wind. It was not anything I had known before. A shadow shifted just beyond the curve of a gnarled oak. I froze. Its movement was deliberate but slow, patient. Not chasing, not hiding, just observing. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it. The forest had always played tricks. But then the silence became too perfect. The pause between rustles too exact, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. I crouched behind a mossy boulder, hands cold and trembling. The shadow lingered. A thin tendril of fog brushed my hair, cold and wet. I felt it before I saw it. A presence beside me, waiting, listening. I whispered again, this time my own fear. I see you. The answer came as a rustle, delicate and precise. Not near, not far. It was everywhere. I tried moving forward, stepping carefully over roots slick with moss. The forest shifted with me, rearranging in the fog. Branches grazed my arms, leaving a sticky residue of dew and bark. The faint hum returned, rising and falling with the wind, or with the presence. I could not tell. A pale light broke through the canopy for a heartbeat, catching the mist in silver threads. It revealed nothing but more shadows, each one darker than the last. The footsteps echoed again, slower this time, almost patient, almost human. I stopped. The world was quiet again, but I could feel it in the spaces between sounds, slipping through my thoughts like smoke. I closed my eyes. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding against the hush of the forest, and beneath it, a soft, eternal listening. I wanted to leave, to run, but the forest did not allow movement to be simple. Every step forward was mirrored, every pause answered. I finally understood. It was waiting, not for me, not for an end, just waiting. And so I stayed, barely breathing, letting the fog swallow my shape. The rustling continued. The hum persisted. The unseen listener waited, patient, eternal, and perfectly still. And I, too, waited. The trail had been familiar once. A path I walked every late afternoon, the leaves soft under my boots, damp with the smell of earth and decay. But now it had vanished. I paused, listening. The wind stirred the branches above, low murmurs brushing my ears. I thought I could hear my own heartbeat, but it didn't belong to me. I turned, one direction, then another. Every way looked the same. Mist clung to the trees like thin cloth, pale and shivering. The forest felt larger, deeper. Each step sunk into something heavier than moss, something older than the path itself. It whispered beneath my soles. My fingers brushed against bark slick with cold dew. It felt alive, breathing, swelling. I wanted to mark my way, scratch a line into the tree, anything. But the marks disappeared. The bark was smooth again, as if I'd never touched it. I swallowed. The air tasted damp, metallic, like rusted coins hidden under layers of soil. A bird called, sharp, distant, but it made no sense here. It echoed, then stopped. I walked faster. Branches clawed at my sleeves, snagging my coat. Soft footsteps followed, but when I looked, the fog held only shadows. Shadows that seemed to breathe with the trees. I tried to remember. The path had always been around the creek, past a fallen oak, where the sunlight pooled in gold. Now there was only gray. Nothing but gray and the smell of wet needles. A movement flickered. Just a shift behind the trunks. I blinked. Gone. My pulse settled into a slow, steady drum that matched the hum in the fog. I called out. My voice cracked against the silence. No answer. Not even wind. Just emptiness that felt like hands brushing my shoulders. The fog thickened. I reached for a tree, thinking it might guide me, but it was hollow and cold. I pressed my palm to it, and the chill crawled up my arm under my skin. It was watching. I could feel it. I tried to retrace my steps. I thought I'd find the old trail. Each tree I passed looked familiar, yet wrong. The roots were longer. The shadows stretched further than they should. The forest was infinite. It swallowed every landmark. Panic rose quietly, a soft pressure in my chest, like fog settling there, pushing the air from my lungs. I whispered to myself, hoping sound could tether me, but my words vanished into the mist. I tripped over a root and fell. The ground was cold, wet. I pressed my face into the soil, smelling it, tasting it. It was the same earth as a trail, yet it wasn't. I lifted my head. Everything was still gray, still endless. Soft footsteps again. Not mine. Closer this time. I froze. The fog swirled. A shadow moved within it. Pale light catching its edges like a thin veil. I wanted to follow it, to run, to stay, but my legs refused. I whispered apologies. To whom? I don't know. The forest answered with silence, and that silence felt alive. Time lost meaning. Hours? Minutes? I could not tell. The fog pressed in. The trees leaned closer, and the smell of damp decay grew sharper. I felt the weight of the forest in my chest, pressing me down, keeping me still. And then, the trail, brief, fleeting. I saw it for a heartbeat. A line of moss, the curve of the creek, the sunlight slipping through leaves. I ran, chased it with every breath. But when I reached out, nothing. The path had folded back into itself, vanished, as if it had never been. I sank to my knees. The fog whispered through the trees, curling around me. I couldn't see the sky, couldn't see the trail, couldn't see anything I knew. The forest had swallowed it all. I breathed slowly now, though my lungs ached. Softly I listen. The wind hums. The leaves rustle. The fog swallows every sound except my own pulse. I am here, alone, and the trail is gone. The fog clung to the forest floor. It smelled of wet earth and pine resin. I walked slowly, my boots sinking slightly into the damp moss. Moonlight struggled to the thick branches, scattering in pale shards across the ground. Shadows pooled in the hollows between roots. I could hear my own breath quickening, though I tried to steady it. Then I saw it, a single eye, glimmering, suspended between two gnarled oaks like a lantern. It didn't blink. It didn't move. Yet I knew it was watching. Every step I took, every twitch of muscle, it followed. I tried to tell myself it was a trick of the light, a reflection from some glassy surface left behind by the wind or rain. But the eye, it was too steady, too aware. I stopped, held my breath. Even the wind seemed to hush itself. The forest shifted around me. Leaves rustled in half-formed patterns, like whispers. Branches swayed though the air was still. And the eye stayed, watching. I thought of turning, but my legs refused. My eyes stayed locked with it. There was something pale in the glimmer, something not quite human. I could almost feel the weight of its stare on my skin, as if each second pressed deeper into my chest. The air grew colder. The mist reached up to my knees. I tried to breathe quietly, but the fog seemed to draw the sound out of me. A faint hum crept into the corners of my mind, soft, vibrating, impossible to place. It thrummed beneath my ribs, under my teeth, brushing against my ears. It shifted just slightly, a tilt, a shimmer of color that didn't belong. Not curiosity, not play, predation, or hunger. I couldn't tell. I didn't want to. Something rustled behind me. Not leaves, not branches. A subtle, sliding scrape along the ground. I spun around, heart hammering, but nothing moved. The mist thickened. It wrapped around my legs like a living thing, cold and damp. I could smell decay somewhere deeper in the woods. Something old, ancient, watching. And still, it glimmered brighter now. A pulse of light through the fog, like the slow blink of a dying star. I whispered my own name, unsure if anyone could hear me. Even that seemed loud in the hollow silence. The eye didn't respond. It never would. My hands shook as I reached for a branch, anything to steady myself. The wood was slick with moisture. I felt the rough bark under my fingers, grounding me. But it pulled at me in a way I couldn't resist. I stepped forward, then backward. Every instinct screamed to run, but my feet were glued to the moss. A faint wind stirred. A shiver ran down my spine, through every joint, every muscle. And for a heartbeat, I thought I saw something else. A flicker of shape behind the trees. A shadow moving against the stillness. But when I blinked, it vanished. Only the eye remained. Time stretched then. Moments dripped like water from leaves, slow and silent. I tried to count them. 1, 2, 3. But numbers were meaningless here. I had been watched for hours. Or seconds. I couldn't tell. The forest exhaled around me. A soft, rustling sigh, like something breathing in tandem with me. And then it blinked. Just once. Slowly, deliberately. I stumbled back, tripping over roots slick with mist. Fingers clawing at moss, at dirt, at anything solid. My heart hammering, lungs burning. The eye shimmered once more, then faded. Just a glint. A pale spark disappearing into the fog. I didn't chase it. I didn't look for it again. I let the forest swallow me, step by careful step. The silence followed me, heavy, patient, waiting. And somewhere deep in the mist, I could still feel it, watching, always watching. The air was thick with late autumn fog. Leaves, damp and brittle, whispered underfoot as I walked. The old tree stood alone at the edge of the clearing, its roots twisting like pale veins into the dark soil. I knelt at the base, pressing my hand against the earth. It felt colder than the air around me. Almost wrong. No insects, no rustling worms, no decay, just silence. My heartbeat ticked in my ears. Steady, slow, predictable. And then another beat answered me. It was faint at first, almost like the wind, but it followed, matching, mocking, echoing my own pulse from deep beneath the roots. I sank my fingers into the cold soil, trying to find the source. Nothing moved. The earth was unnaturally still, almost waiting. A smell rose up, damp and metallic, like old rain over rusted iron. I shivered. The fog curled around my neck, sticky and quiet. I tried to stand, but the ground felt heavy beneath me. The tree seemed taller now, its branches clawing at the pale sky. Shadows pooled at the base, thickening with each heartbeat beneath my hands. Soft, wet whispers brushed my ears, or maybe it was my own thoughts, falling apart in the cold. I felt the roots shiver, as if something moved just below, unseen. My breath caught. The second heartbeat grew clearer, closer. I pressed my ear to the soil. It thumped in rhythm with mine, slowly, deliberately, like it was learning me. A shiver ran down my spine, crawling under my skin. Every rustling leaf sounded like footsteps. The fog seemed to inhale with me. I drew back my hand, but the soil clung. Sticky, warm, not cold anymore. The heartbeat kept keeping pace. I wanted to leave, to run, but my legs were heavy, as if the earth itself resisted my retreat. The shadows shifted, curling along the roots like smoke. Something beneath me shifted too, soft and wet. A subtle pressure, gentle but insistent, against the soles of my feet. I could smell it now. Iron, wet clay, something alive and not alive, all at once. I wanted to scream, but the fog swallowed my voice before it could leave. The clearing was quiet again, the night holding its breath. Yet the heartbeat remained. Beneath me, pulsing in time with my own, patient, waiting. I stepped back finally, shaking, and the fog rose higher, hiding the roots, hiding the clearing. When I looked back, the tree seemed older, heavier, its roots curling like fingers around something I could not see. I left with the taste of iron on my tongue, the echo of that heartbeat lingering in my chest. And in the silence that followed, I felt it watching, always beneath. The street was empty, coated in the soft haze of early evening. Fog clung to the cracks in the pavement, curling around the edges of the lampposts. My breath drifted in small clouds, dissolving before it touched the damp air. I noticed it first on the corner of my eye. My shadow, longer than it should be. It stretched along the walls, pulling across the pavement, twisting in ways that didn't match me. I paused. The fog seemed to hesitate with me, holding its breath. I took a step forward. The shadow followed, but not quite right. A finger lingered behind me when I had moved mine. A knee bent where mine remained straight. I stopped completely. The whispers began, soft, insistent. At first, I thought they were carried by the wind. Then I realized they were coming from below me, from the shadows themselves. Come closer. Step into the dark. The words weren't clear, just a coil of suggestion in the quiet. I shook my head, but my feet felt heavy. Each step toward the alley seemed guided by something other than my own will. The street light flickered. My shadow arched higher, stretched thinner, as if it were reaching for something unseen. I tried to shake it off. The air smelled damp, earthy, almost decaying. I could feel the chill in my spine, creeping slowly upward like smoke. Rustling whispers wound around me, brushing against my ears. I stopped under a pale light. The shadow recoiled, detached slightly, and then snapped back with a soft crack, like a branch underfoot. I stumbled back, my hand brushing the wall. The surface was colder than it should have been, slick with moisture. A shiver ran down my arm. I could feel the shadow moving independently, stretching into corners, curling against walls, inching toward the alley behind me. It was alive, or maybe it had always been. I leaned against the brick, listening. The whispers became clearer. Names, softly spoken names I didn't recognize, yet somehow remembered. A lullaby twisted into something hollow and insistent. The voice didn't belong to anyone I knew. It belonged to the darkness. I forced my eyes back to the shadow. It no longer mirrored me. It smiled, not with lips, but with the curvature of itself, elongated, warped, a silhouette mocking my shape. The street light flickered again. Each pulse of light revealed slight changes. The shadow crouched, stretched, curled like smoke around my legs. It seemed to breathe. I could feel its inhale in my chest. I tried to run, feet pounding against wet pavement, my heartbeat hammering. But the shadow stayed with me, growing longer, leaning forward, whispering closer. Don't fight it, join me. The words wound around my lungs, sticky and soft. I ducked into the alley, pressing my back to the cold brick. The fog swallowed the entrance behind me. My shadow stretched impossibly long over the walls, curling into every corner, mocking every movement. I touched it, cold, hard, but not solid. It trembled beneath my fingers, like water held in a thin membrane, ready to break. Silence came, heavy, thick. The whispers stopped. I felt the weight of the dark pressing against me. A single rustle echoed from the far corner. I turned. Nothing, only my shadow, crawling along the walls like it had a mind of its own. I stepped back. It snapped closer. I could see faint shapes moving within it. Tiny flickers, hints of forms that were almost human. Almost, but not. I held my breath. The fog pressed closer. The shadow trembled again, stretching further into the unseen. I realized then it didn't belong to me. It had never belonged to me. It would follow always in the corners of my vision, in the spaces between lamplight and fog. I turned and ran, but the echo of whispers lingered, soft, insistent, pulling at the edges of my mind. And I could feel it, my shadow, longer than possible, waiting, stretching just behind me. The mist settled over the path like a thin, wet blanket. Every step pressed softly against the damp earth, and the air smelled faintly of cold smoke and wet leaves. A lantern appeared first as a flicker, distant and small, swinging like a heartbeat in the fog. I paused, feeling the quiet hum of the night vibrate beneath my skin. It was oddly comforting at first. The glow washed over the twisted branches, casting pale light that barely touched the ground. Each step closer made it seem further away. I reached out, but the air swallowed my hand. The lantern swung just beyond reach, slow, deliberate, as though it knew where I would step next. Shadows moved in the fog. Figures, blurred, indistinct. I thought I could see faces, but when I blinked, they were gone, melting into the gray haze. The scent of damp earth deepened, richer somehow, like the forest was breathing around me. Leaves whispered in the soft wind, rustling against each other. It sounded like whispers too faint to understand. The lantern's glow pulsed, gentle and strange, revealing something low on the path, a hand, perhaps, or a tangle of roots shaped like one. I swallowed, the sound heavy in my ears, and tried to convince myself it was nothing. The light swung again, and the shape shifted, as if the mist itself had a pulse. I took another step. The fog pressed closer, curling around my ankles, cold and damp. Soft footsteps echoed behind me, but when I turned, there was nothing, only the swinging lantern. I caught glimpses of them now, figures standing silently, just beyond the light. They didn't move, yet I felt their presence. Something in their posture made the air stiff, like it remembered a long-forgotten sadness. The lantern dipped lower, illuminating a pale face, half hidden by fog. I blinked. Gone. Only a hollow mist remained, curling around the trees like smoke. My breath was loud in my ears. I felt my pulse in my fingertips. The soft, swinging light seemed to guide me forward, though I didn't know why. Branches scraped my arms, rough and wet. The air smelled faintly metallic. I caught a whiff of something else too. Smoke? Decay? I couldn't tell. I stopped. The lantern hung at the edge of a clearing now, swaying slowly. Figures formed in the periphery, watching, not moving, not speaking, just waiting. A pale hand reached toward the light, or maybe it was mine that trembled too much to tell. The lantern drifted away. I followed. The fog swallowed the clearing behind me. Every blink erased the shapes. I tried not to breathe too loudly. Each exhale stirred the mist, curling it like a living thing. I thought I heard laughter, soft, fleeting, like it came from far away and inside me at the same time. The lantern's glow flickered in response, dipping low, then rising again. It led me to a hollowed tree, twisted and blackened, hollow inside. A shadow waited there. I stepped closer. It moved, or I moved. I couldn't tell. The light revealed a face, pale and featureless, and then nothing again. The mist thickened, pressing cold against my skin. The lantern floated just ahead, swaying slower now, almost invited me to stop. I did. The air grew heavier. Silent. I realized then that I had stopped breathing. The figures had stopped too, or maybe I had stopped seeing them. The lantern swayed once, twice, and then drifted higher into the fog, shrinking to a tiny flicker. I reached out, but it vanished. Only mist remained, only the hush of the forest, and the memory of soft footsteps echoing in the fog. I stayed there a long while, watching, listening. The lantern never returned. The path seemed the same, yet different. The shadows were thicker. The fog hung heavier. And I knew that somewhere, just beyond the reach of the pale light, the figures waited. Silent, patient, and endless. The air was sharp, slicing through the last edges of autumn. Fog clung to the ground, pale and trembling, like it feared to move. I walked slowly along the frozen path, boots crunching over brittle leaves. The whispers began almost immediately. At first, they were soft, threading through the fog. I thought I imagined them, but then the cold seemed to carry them, wrapping them tighter around my chest. Each voice was distinct. Some murmured regrets I had long tried to forget. Others repeated fears I never dared to name aloud. I could feel them on my skin, brushing like icy fingertips, lingering too long. I tried to turn away, step faster, but every motion seemed to tighten the invisible cords. My breath hung in the air, thick and heavy, and the whispers pressed closer. A rustling broke the rhythm of my steps. Not leaves, something beneath, moving, slow and careful. I paused. The fog shifted, and for a moment, the world felt hollow, as if the path had swallowed itself whole. The voices didn't scatter. They multiplied, layering over one another, a chorus of frozen memories. A memory of laughter that wasn't mine, a shadow of someone I had loved and lost, a sharp pang of shame that made my knees ache, all of it condensed into a cold, sticky pressure around my chest. I pressed my hands to my ears. It did nothing. The whispers were not just sound. They were something I could feel crawling along my spine, seeping into my fingers and toes. The fog carried them, bending them around corners, letting them linger in the space behind me. I could see them if I tried. Pale threads, thin and glimmering, floating just above the frost. They looped and twisted like smoke caught in a breeze. And every thread carried a fragment, something personal, intimate, sharp. The wind picked up, hollow and empty. It didn't scatter the whispers. It sharpened them. They hummed, vibrating softly through the soles of my boots, pressing against my lungs. Every step forward made them tighter. Every inhale drew them deeper inside me. I wanted to run, but the path seemed to stretch, to elongate, turning the night into something infinite. Each breath condensed into frost, catching threads in its mist, pulling them into me. I could taste them, cold, metallic, bitter, like frozen regret melting slowly on my tongue. I reached the trees, rough bark scratching my palms, hoping to anchor myself. The fog shivered against my fingers, and I realized the threads were not anchored outside. They were part of the air itself, woven into every step, every exhale. A shadow brushed my peripheral vision. I didn't look. I could feel its weight beside me, its breath mingling with the frozen whispers. It did not speak. It did not move in any human way. It simply existed, patient, waiting. The path began to narrow. Snow coated the edges, pale as bone, reflecting the faint light of a moon I could barely see. Every thread pulled tighter, wrapping around my wrists, my ankles, my chest. I could hear my own heart in the quiet, thudding uneven, but even it seemed muted against the chorus. I slowed. The whispers softened as I did, almost like they were watching me, studying the pace of my breaths. I lowered my head and felt the frost bite my cheeks, cold pressing against my lids, turning my vision into a silver haze. Somewhere deep, beneath the cold and the threads, a small thought flickered. Perhaps if I stayed still, if I let them be, they would untangle themselves. And in that fragile silence, I noticed a faint warmth against my chest, the barest pulse of my own heart, trembling, faint, persistent. The whispers paused, hesitant, like the fog itself was listening now, waiting for me to speak. I breathed slowly. Step by careful step, I moved forward. The threads loosened. The chill lingered, but the weight of voices faded into the pale light. The frozen whispers remained, hovering, patient, waiting for another night, another step. And I walked on, wrapped in the fog, alone, yet accompanied by the faint echo of every regret I had ever carried. The forest was still. A pale light spilled between the trunks, soft and hesitant. I stepped on dry leaves, and they cracked beneath me, louder than I expected. The trees, they shivered, not with wind, just trembling. Leaves rustled. Whispers pressed against my ears, quick and fractured, impossible to understand. I stopped. The forest held its breath with me. Shadows pulled along the trunks, thick and shifting. Sometimes they stretched into shapes that weren't quite trees. I caught myself staring, and when I blinked, they had moved. My chest tightened. I felt watched. Every breath a drum in the quiet, echoing too loudly. Footsteps that weren't mine seemed to follow, soft, careful, just behind the rustling leaves. A fog crept between the roots, thin at first, then curling around my ankles. Cold, damp. It smelled like wet earth and something older, something forgotten. I tried to tell myself it was the wind, but there was no wind. Just trembling trees, whispers that made my skin crawl, shadows that pulsed. A twig snapped, or maybe I imagined it. The rustling intensified, as though the leaves themselves were breathing. I felt them leaning closer, pressing toward me, just out of reach. I moved, slowly, careful. Every step sent shivers through the forest floor, shivers mirrored by the trunks. They seemed alive, turning toward me with subtle intention. I paused near a hollow. Darkness pooled inside it, thicker than night. The whispers grew, not words, not language, just murmurs, teasing, curling around my mind. The air pressed heavier. Every inhalation tasted faintly metallic, like blood or old iron. The fog hugged my legs. I wanted to run, but my feet were rooted. Something brushed past me, cold, thin, like a finger across my spine. I held my breath. Nothing moved, yet I knew I was not alone. The shadows flickered. They mimicked my movements, or I mimicked theirs. I couldn't tell. My heart thudded against my ribs like a warning drum. I turned a corner. Another hollow, another shadow, and the trees, they leaned closer, closer with their pale, whispering leaves. I wanted to speak, but my voice stayed trapped, small and afraid. The rustling followed me, soft footsteps echoing where no feet could tread. The fog swallowed shapes, then spat them back in the corner of my vision. Every trunk a sentinel, every leaf a conspirator. I stumbled. The ground was soft, treacherous. Cold seeped into my hands as I braced against a trunk. It shivered beneath my touch. I recoiled. A branch tapped lightly above. Then another, a rhythm, slow and deliberate. Not wind, not animal, something else. I breathed shallowly. The forest leaned in. I could hear it watching, waiting. Then silence. No whispers, no rustling, just the fog curling around me. The trees still, yet I knew they were not asleep. I moved again, slower this time, careful with each step. The shadows stayed quiet, patient. The forest exhaled around me, a soft, wet sound, and as I left the hollowed path behind, I felt it. The memory of trembling trees, whispers that refused meaning and shadows that remembered my name. Alone, I walked on, with the forest still watching, and the shivering trees never letting me go. The air in the pine forest was cold that afternoon, a clean, sharp cold that made every breath feel new. The scent of damp earth and rotting needles filled my lungs, and my boots sank into the soft, wet carpet of the forest floor. There was no path here, just the endless, quiet stand of trees. And then I saw it, the door. Standing alone between two great pines, IT was simple, made of wood so pale it seemed to glow in the dim light, like bone bleached by a sun that never reached this part of the woods. There was no framed eno house attached to it. Just a door, rooted in the forest floor, unyielding and absolute. I stopped. The only sound was the rustle of a few last leaves above, and my heart was a soft, quick drum in my chest. This was impossible. IT was a prank, a piece of art, something left behind. But the silence that clung to it felt ancient. IT didn't belong to this world. My curiosity was a physical pull, a tightness in my stomach. IT was stronger than the prickle of fear on my neck. I took a step closer. The air grew still. Colder as I reached out a hand. The wood was smooth. Unnaturally, so IT felt like ice under my fingertips. There was no grain, no texture, just a perfect cold plane. My fingers found the cold brass knob. IT turned without a sound. The latch release was soft, metallic side. I took a deep breath of the pine-scented air, and I pulled. The door swung inward, and the forest exhaled. IT was a rush of air that came from everywhere at once, a long, slow breath I never knew the woods had been holding. IT wasn't wind. IT didn't move the leaves or the branches. IT moved to meet a wave of stillness that emptied my lungs. The sound that followed was a loud silence I've ever heard. IT was thick to suffocate. IT pressing on my eardrums, a weight I could feel. The rustling leaves were gone. The distant chirp of a bird was gone. Even the soft thump of my own heart seemed to have been swallowed. All that was left was a profound, aching quiet. I stared through the doorway. There was no room on the other side, and no different world. Just the same forest, continuing on, the same trees, the same fading light. But it was wrong. The colors were muted, washed out to shades of gray and dull green. Like a photograph left in the sun too long. The air that drifted out was stale. IT carried a smell of old dust and forgotten places. I took a step back, MY boot crunched on a twig. But I heard nothing. The silence ate the sound before it could reach me. The shadows shifted between the trees beyond the door. IT was tall and thin and moved with a slow, deliberate grace. IT didn't walk, it unfolded. From one tree to the next. I wanted to argue that MY muscles were tense, coiled springs, but a deep primal part of me was frozen. Watching. The pale door stood open an invitation, not a warning. Then, from the washed-out world beyond the threshold, a soft footstep, not on leaves, but on something soft, something that gave way without a sound that I saw a hand, then, pale as the door itself, IT rested on the trunk of a pine tree. The fingers were too long. The movement was all wrong. That's when I finally moved. I stumbled back, turning away from that terrible, silent frame. I didn't look back. I pushed through the ferns and the low-hanging branches. MY breath was ragged in my throat, loud in the returning sound of the forest. I heard a bird again, the wind in the pines. When I dared to glance over my shoulder, the door was gone, just trees, endless, normal trees. But the memory of that silence stayed with me. IT followed me home. IT sits with me now, in the quiet of my own room, at a hollow space where sound should be. And sometimes in the dead of night, I'll wake up, and for a single, heart-stopping moment, the world outside my window is utterly, completely silent. The air in the pine forest was cold and still. IT tasted the damp earth and rotting needles. MY own breath was a pale ghost in front of me. Each step was a soft crunch, a release of pressure in the quiet. I walked the familiar path home, a shortcut I'd taken 100 times. But tonight, the darkness between the trees felt thick, watchful. Then I heard it. Not a branch snapping, not an animal scurrying. Another footstep that IT landed a half second after my own, a perfect, hollow copy. I stopped. The forest fell into a deep, waiting silence. An old cricket chirped, an old wind rustled the pine needles. Just a dull thump in my own heart in my ears. I took another cautious step. That crunched MY foot on the gravel. Crunched AN echo from directly behind me. My skin went cold. I didn't want to turn around. I focused on the path ahead. The distant, warm light of my house through the trees. SO close. I started walking again, a little faster. Step, crunch. Step, crunch. The rhythm was perfect, a mocking imitation of my own pace. I increased my speed to a brisk walk. The echoing steps matched me instantly. OLAG. No hesitation. Step, step. Crunch, crunch. Step, step. Crunch, crunch. A knot of cold fear tightened in my stomach. This was no trick of the woods. This was something else. Something keeping pace. I began to argue, and MY boots pounded the hard ground. MY breath came in ragged, sharp gasps. And the thing behind me ran, too. Its steps were not the frantic, messy fall of a man running in panic. They were clean, precise, and a perfect, thunderous echo of my own frantic footfalls. Pound, pound, pound. It was faster now. Closer, I could feel the vibration of its steps to the soles of my shoes, a rhythmic shock that traveled up my bones. I dared to glance over my shoulder. The path was empty to a tunnel of black trees and shifting shadow. But the sound was right there, just an arm's length behind my heels. I pushed my legs harder. A burning ache shot through my lungs. The light from my house was getting brighter. I could see the outline of the back porch, the kitchen window. The echoing steps began to change. They were no longer just matching mine. They were overlapping, and my right foot would land. And before my left would follow, its right foot would land too. The rhythm was breaking. Splintering that stomp, 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 stomp. It was no longer an echo that IT was a presence, running beside me, keeping time in a way that was not human. I stumbled onto my lawn. The grass muffled my steps, but its steps on the grass were loud. Sharp and clear, I fumbled for the back door handle, and my hands were shaking, slick with a cold sweat. The steps were right on top of me now. I could feel a chill on the back of my neck, dot a dry static in the air. I threw the door open and fell inside, slamming it shut behind me. I leaned against the solid wood, gasping till my whole body trembled. Silence, a deep, profound silence on the other side of the door. N-O pounding, N-O scratching. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator. I let out a slow, shaky breath. My knees felt weak. I was safe. The lock was turned. The world was outside. I closed my eyes for just a moment, trying to calm the frantic beating of my heart. And then I heard a single soft footstep from the hallway behind me. Inside the house, it was not an echo that IT was an answer. Then another, slow, deliberate, moving from the dark hallway toward the kitchen, toward me. I didn't turn. I just stood there, pressed against the door, listening, waiting for the next step to fall. The shed door finally gave way with a groan that tore through the afternoon quiet. It was late October. The air smelled of wet earth and decaying leaves. A cold, damp feeling seeped through my jacket. Inside, the light was thin and dusty. It was a tomb for forgotten things. Old gardening tools, their handles splintered. A stack of clay pots, cracked and useless. And in the far corner, under a sheet coated in grime, was a shape I recognized. The old radio. My grandfather's. I hadn't thought about it in 30 years. The wood casing was cool under my fingers. It felt like touching a tombstone. I carried it into the kitchen of the empty house, set it on the table. The plastic dial was yellowed, the numbers faded. I found a cord, plugged it in. A soft, warm hum filled the silence. A familiar smell of old dust and heated vacuum tubes wrapped around me. I turned the dial. Static hissed, a soft white noise. Then a voice, faint, as if coming from the bottom of a well. It was my mother's voice, singing that lullaby, the one she sang when I was sick, the one I hadn't heard since I was 7. My breath caught in my chest. The static returned, swallowing the melody. I turned the dial again. A crackle, then my own voice, a child's voice, high and clear. I was crying. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to break it. I had forgotten that. The little porcelain horse on the mantel, my father's face red with anger, the shame hot and sharp. The radio whispered it all back to me, every detail. I stepped away from the table. My hands were trembling. The hum from the radio grew louder. It wasn't a warm sound anymore. It felt attentive. I unplugged it. The cord fell to the floor with a dull thud. The kitchen was utterly silent. For a whole minute, there was only the sound of my own heart. Then the hum started again, a low, pulsing drone, coming from the unplugged radio. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I picked it up. The wood was now warm, almost body warm. I carried it back to the shed, laid it back in its corner, draped the dusty sheet over it. I closed the shed door. I pushed the bolt shut. The solid thud of metal was a relief. Back in the kitchen, I tried to forget. I made tea. The steam fogged the window, but the house didn't feel empty anymore. There was a pressure in the air, a waiting quality. That night, in the spare room, I lay in bed. The wind rustled the trees outside, and beneath it a hum, so soft you could miss it, a constant, vibrating presence just at the edge of hearing. I put the pillow over my head. I could still feel it, a faint resonance in my bones. I got up, walked to the window. The shed door was open, just a sliver of darkness, a black mouth. I know I closed it. I know I bolted it. Downstairs, the kitchen was cold. The radio was back on the table, sitting there, silent, dark. I didn't touch it. I just stared. Then the dial began to glow, a soft orange light, like a single waking eye, and a new sound emerged from the speaker. Not a whisper, not a memory. It was a dry, rattling breath. The sound my grandfather made in his last sleep. The sound I heard sitting by his bed. A private sound. A sound that belonged only to me and that dark room. The radio was breathing. In and out. I reached for the cord. It wasn't there. It had never been plugged back in. I stood in that cold kitchen, listening to the ghost of a breath. And I knew it wasn't playing the past anymore. It was learning the present. It was learning me. And now, it is something new to whisper. Something that is only mine. I just have to wait and listen. The air changed. It was the first thing I noticed. The heavy scent of pine and damp earth had just vanished, replaced by nothing but hollow emptiness. I took another step. And the trees, they just ended, not like a park or a property line. IT was a sharp line, as if drawn by a blade. Behind me, the wall of the forest, dark and tangled. Before me, a clearing. It was wrong. The light was gray to pale, sourceless glow that didn't seem to come from the sky. There was no sky, just a ceiling of mist, swirling like smoke that IT felt old, older than the woods at a place suspended, waiting. I stood at the edge for a long time. The MY boots were caked in MUD. Y hands were trembling. I couldn't make myself cross that line. But the hum, it had been following me for hours, a low, electrical thrum that vibrated in my teeth. I and my bones. IT was here. In this place that IT was this place that IT poured out of the mist and wrapped around me to a thick, soundless blanket. I had to step forward, and MY foot sank into moss. IT was soft. Too soft, like stepping on something that was once alive. The mist reacted. I didn't move with the wind. There was no wind. IT coiled, IT shifted. Out in the center of the clearing, the gray swirled and thickened. For a second, it looked like a person in a tall, slender shape, just standing there, watching me. My breath caught in my throat. That IT was cold, a deep, internal cold that my jacket couldn't touch. The shape dissolved. Just more mist. MY heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I made myself look down at my feet. The moss was a vibrant, impossible green. IT seemed to pulse softly with the rhythm of the hum. I looked back toward the tree line. The IT was gone. Where the sharp edge of the forest should have been was only more mist, the seamless gray wall that I turned in a slow circle. Nothing but the clearing, the moss, the humming silence. There was no way back. The panic should have been immediate, a screaming, clawing thing. But it wasn't. A strange calm settled over me. It's not a heavy, final understanding. This wasn't a path I had taken. IT was a place I'd always been walking towards. Every wrong turn, every dead end, they were all leading here. This last clearing. The hum softened. IT wasn't in my ears anymore. IT was inside my head, a memory of sound, a feeling of static in my blood. I saw another shape form. Closer this time, that IT was the outline of my childhood home. The porch swing moved back and forth. Pushed by no one, the image was made of fog and memory. IT lasted for a single heartbeat. Then it was gone. Another shape. The face of someone I loved, and a smile I hadn't seen in years. IT was etched in the mist for a moment. Eyes full of static. Then it unraveled into nothing. The clearing was showing me my life, not to torment me, but because that's all that was left here. The echoes, the impressions left behind. I am not lost. That's what I finally understood. Lost. There has to be a place to be found. There has to be a world to return to. There is no world beyond this mist. The forest wasn't endless. I am a visitor here, not a guest who stayed too long, who looked at things he wasn't supposed to see. I sat down on the moss. IT was dry and strangely warmed. I pulled my knees to my chest. The hum was a lullaby now to a soft, constant vibration in the air. I watched the mist form its silent play. Shadows of my past, dancing in a circle with no end. I think I've always been here. I just didn't know it. The light never changes. The mist never clears. And the hum, it just goes on. I closed my eyes. There was no difference. The gray was inside me, too. I am only a visitor. And some visitors never leave